Welcome back, Life Sciences, from your break. All right, as I said, let the oxygen going, get the blood flowing. Let's quickly recap. We're looking at this concept of a cell. And we look at the concept of a cell, we can see that there's a structure that has a boundary around it, okay? And we looked at what was filled on the inside, the cytoplasm. Now, all living cells have this boundary called the cell membrane, and we saw that it was fluid, and it's selectively permeable what can go in and out of a cell. Now, sometimes, all right, we find that plant cells, well, actually all the time, plant cells have two boundaries, and we're going to have a look at that concept quickly. All right, so now what I've drawn in over here, something you're going to become quite familiar with, is I've drawn, this is a diagram of a plant cell. Now you can see I've circled, there's a little purple circle over here. Now, as you can see on the inside over here, this is going to be my cell membrane. But when it comes to a plant cell, they have got another structure, all right, on the outside, and that is called a cell wall. Now, this is really important as it's only found in plant cells. Animal cells do not have it. So animal cells are just going to have a cell membrane. Plant cells have got this structure called a cell wall on the outside. Now, when you come to why it's important that plant cells have the structure, when we look at the structure now, I want you to think of the following. It is hard and it is rigid, and it's got like a fixed shape to it. Now, if I were to ask you to go and cut out a plant and open it up, and do you find a skeleton, do you find a support system? The answer is no. So a plant, in order to be strong, to stand up straight, all right, to be able to put the leaves out for photosynthesis to occur, a plant needs to have its own skeleton. Now, it doesn't have that. We have the bones of our skeleton as our support structure. What plant cells have is the cell wall. Now, this cell wall is rigid. It's strong. It's not like the cell membrane that can move, right? It's actually a non-living structure. Now, when I talk about the cell wall, you don't have to know all of this, but its structure is made up of these, all right, if I can say, non-living materials. Now, most of it is made up of something that is called cellulose. There are also two other parts to it, pectin and something called lignin. And very simply, what you need to understand is these parts are hard, all right? They are solid and they are non-living. Cellulose, guys, when you eat it, that is when you eat something, we say you need fiber. What is fiber? Our body can't digest cellulose. So when we eat any kind of plant material, cellulose goes through our body and scrapes our body clean. And it's really important to keep us nice and healthy. But we can't digest it. We don't have an enzyme for it. Right? But the cell wall, in its rigidity, it will allow everything to come through if it could. Right? It's non-living. It can't decide what to let in and what to let out. That's why right underneath it is going to be, you see the little yellow and green is going, and that plasma membrane is another word for the cell membrane. So the cell wall, quite intricate with all these hardened substances. And the reason, as we say, if we look at the function just now, why it's there. Now, plant cells need to communicate. It would be very difficult to communicate if I put two bricks next to each other. They are too hard, right? Nothing will be able to move through. But what I do is, instead of it making this solid, I'm going to bring the little razor out here. I have, all right, let me do that. I make these little gaps. Can you see that over here? I put these little gaps in the cell wall, and they are called plasmodesmata. And what the plasmodesmata do, can you see? They allow the cells to communicate. So the cell membrane will still decide what comes in and out of the cell, because the cell membrane is still in between it. But all I do is I don't have the solid cell wall in between these. And you can imagine they're like cytoplasmic strands that stream across from one cell to the other. Because cells need to be in communication with each other. They need to be able to transport things. Now, what is the function? As we said, what is the function of the cell wall? Because it has this solid feature, it supports. And in supporting, it also protects a plant against mechanical injury when it bends in the wind or things like that. So it just gives it that really strong, all right, part. I don't know if you guys use cotton wool. Right, cotton wool is cell walls, all right? Those are all the dead parts of the cell that we're going to use. So only plant cells are going to have a cell wall, but animal cells and plant cells are going to have a cell membrane. Okay, guys, now we're going to look at the last concept in our cells, and this is what an organelle is. Now, very often you get very confused with the word organ and organelle, and basically what an organelle means is a tiny organ. But what an organelle is if I look at here, I have my cell membrane, my boundary, okay? Then I have my jelly inside it, that is my cytoplasm. And then inside the cell, I've got a variety of structures, and we're going to look now, right, at the structure called the nucleus. There are a variety of structures that are going to have a specific function within a cell. So what an organelle is that when we look at this concept of a eukaryotic and a prokaryotic cell, what we noticed is, as I said to you, when a eukaryotic cell became more complex, so it had more things inside the cell that had to do something. So inside the cell, all right, I've got this, all right, these structures, and these structures are all very important, okay? They are surrounded by their own membrane. Now, what is the membrane? It's the same as the cell membrane. So each of these are what we call membrane-bound structures. Now, the most important of all of these organelles, all living cells, all right, all living cells, eukaryotic living cells, that is very important, because a prokaryotic cell does not have this concept of what is a nucleus. So we've looked at what a cell membrane is, all right, so separating the outside and the inside. We have this jelly-like gel keeping everything in space, some hanging around, some dissolved. Now we have this concept of what a nucleus is. Now, when we have a look at what the structure of the nucleus is, this is what the nucleus is. And what the nucleus is, you could say it's the government. Guys, this controls the whole cell. Everything that happens in the cell, everything that the cell does is going to be controlled by this organelle called the nucleus. Okay, so if I was to look at the structure, first of all, I separate it. It's separated from the cytoplasm by its own nuclear membrane. Now, if you have a look, all right, you will see that the nuclear membrane is not solid. It has got these little pores in, and I'm going to explain to you why we need to have the holes there. Now, usually in the center, we've got a very dark staining body. When we look at the cells, it's what we see most often. Don't get confused with the words. It's called the nucleolus, right, which is different to the nucleus. Now, the cytoplasm in the nucleus is called the nucleoplasm. And it's the same as the cytoplasm, because this over here would be the cytoplasm. But because it's in its own organelle, its own structure, we call it the nucleoplasm. Now, when it comes to the nucleus, what is the most interesting part? Guys, this over here. Now, what is that? That is called the chromatin network. Now, what is the chromatin network? I'm sure you've heard, all right, you've done the nucleic acids, deoxyribose nucleic acid. And you are very familiar with this twist of what the DNA is. But when the DNA is in the cell, it's 2 meters. It's 2 meters long. It's huge. So what it does is it coils up, all right, and it tangles up, and when the cell is at rest, we call it the chromatin network. It's the DNA. Here, this chromatin network is all of your hereditary characteristics. This is where your genes, who you are, what you are, and this inside the nucleus, all right, is all the blueprint of what you are, what your cell must do. And as I said, it's wrapped around in this bundle with all different things called the chromatin network. And that is why we have pores, because this little guy has to send messages how the cell must do things. It's too big to move out. So we're going to need to use those pores. Okay. As I said to you, the nucleus controls all the activities of the body. It's the most important organelle. It's what tells a cell what to do, what to become, right? And we're going to see all those things when we look at tissues, etc. Okay, guys, I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. Until next time, cheerio, bye.